Hey guys, it's Rachel, and in today's video, I'm going to be doing the ultimate chocolate chip cookie review test. While we're in quarantine, there's not much else to do but bake, and there are so many recipes out there for chocolate chip cookies, so I thought I would help you guys narrow it down and pick my favorite, so maybe you guys can have an idea of what might be your favorite as well. So today I decided to try 3 different recipes. I'm trying them from 3 prominent brands. First is Bon Appetit, second is New York Times Cooking, and the last is Levain Bakery. We'll be reviewing these cookies based on 3 standards that I just sort of made up and pulled out of nowhere. First is taste, which is probably the most important. Second is texture and consistency, whether you like a dense, chewy cookie or maybe something a bit crisper and cakier. And then the last standard is presentation and aesthetics, just how visually appealing is the cookie, would I want to eat this cookie myself? So the first cookie on the roster is Rick Martin's brown butter and toffee chocolate chip cookies from Bon Appetit. These cookies have been wildly popular on Instagram. I will say that Rick Martin reposted my photo that I posted on Instagram of these cookies, so that made me super happy. But these cookies are really unique because they use brown butter, little chunks of Heath bars or toffee bars, and then at the very end they are finished off with a little bit of flaky fleur de sel, or flaky sea salts. So this recipe starts out pretty strong by using 1 cup of butter, which is equivalent to 2 sticks, in which you're going to melt them down until they form a nice golden brown color, and this is going to be your brown butter. And before I forget, I'm going to list all the recipes down below in the description box, along with any modifications that I made myself or potentially errors as well. So while the brown butter is cooling, we are going to whisk together our dry ingredients, and this includes our flour, baking soda, and salt, and whisk that together in a medium bowl. In a separate bowl, we are going to do what pretty much every cookie recipe requires you to do, which is to combine your sugar and butter and whip those ingredients together. In this case, we're using parts of white sugar, parts of brown sugar, and then the brown butter. As this process is happening, we're going to go ahead and add our vanilla extract and our eggs, and then increase the mixer to a medium-high speed. You'll see that the mixture becomes a really light and fluffy texture and color. And when your mixture starts looking something like this, we're going to go ahead and add our dry ingredients in and just kind of pulse it together so as to not get the flour everywhere. So as soon as the mixture comes together, you don't want to over mix it, so we're going to go ahead and stop the mixer, add in the chocolate chips as well as the toffee bits, and then fold them together. So there is an additional step in this process. We're going to have to let the dough sit for about 30 minutes. According to Rick Martinez, it's to let the flour hydrate. I don't know what that means. I think it might be just to thicken up the dough a little bit, because initially it's very soft, and then once you let it sit, it firms up a bit. Anyway, you're gonna scoop about 1 tablespoon or to 2 tablespoons of dough for your cookie dough balls, and then top it with some fleur de sel. Do not skip out on this part, because honestly it's one of the best parts of this recipe. It is kind of an extra pain in the butt to go get some fleur de sel, and it's also like $7, but it's completely worth it, don't worry. Once the cookies have baked for 10 minutes, you're good to go, and they are absolutely delicious. They have a nice caramelized flavor, a very chewy and dense texture, and I think they're pretty aesthetic, and I would eat them. So the next recipe is New York Times' giant crinkled chocolate chip cookies. These cookies have been making their rounds on Instagram and on other social media platforms, but they are most well known for this pan banging technique, which requires you to pull the cookies out of the oven while they're baking and then bang them against the counter in order to create like a ripple effect on the sides of the cookies. And yes, they will wake up everyone in your household if you do this in the morning. It's so loud, it's not even funny. The giant crinkled chocolate chip cookies from New York Times starts out pretty traditionally. We're going to go ahead and whisk together our dry ingredients first. Set that bowl of dry ingredients aside, and then we are going to do the next step, which is, guess what? Cream the butter and add the sugar. I noticed in this recipe there is more white sugar than there is brown sugar, and for me personally, I am a fan of brown sugar and that molasses-like flavor. I also love the chewy consistency that brown sugar brings to a cookie. So this recipe is also unique because it requires you to add in about a tablespoon of water. I accidentally added in 2 tablespoons, so maybe that's why my cookies turned out a little bit funkier, but I don't know. I also don't have access to chocolate wafers right now, but I did just kind of chop up some Toll House semi-sweet chocolate chip cookies to try and make it more passable. So these cookies are, to be frank, enormous. They're like gigantic cookies. So I used about almost 3 tablespoons of dough for each cookie dough ball, and then I froze them in the fridge for about 15 minutes before baking them off. And I'm not kidding, only about like 3 cookies will fit in an entire baking sheet, which is kind of insane if you think about it. So I decided to do something a little bit off the recipe by adding some flaky sea salt on top of these cookies because I thought it couldn't hurt. I was kind of wrong. They did not complement these cookies at all, so I would not recommend it. And like I mentioned earlier, we are now using the pan banging technique, so after about 10 minutes of letting the cookies bake, you'll pull them out every 2 to 3 minutes just to bang them against the counter in order to flatten them. But I don't know, maybe I was just banging it too hard. I don't know really, it just didn't look so great when they came out of the oven. In terms of taste, the cookies tasted like cookies and cream? I don't know. And then they were really cakey and soft, and I didn't really like the chewiness or the texture at all. In terms of aesthetic, they looked like big-ass pancakes. I would prefer something more petite, I think. And last but not least are Levain Bakery cookies. Levain Bakery is a really popular bakery out in New York City. They're known for their giant chocolate chip walnut cookies, but they also have like oatmeal raisin, dark chocolate peanut butter, etc. There's always lines outside of their stores when it's not quarantine, of course. But their cookies are these massive creations that kind of look like big scones, honestly. They're really well known because when you break their cookies open, they're usually warm and fresh, and they have this like melty, gooey center. I was fortunate enough to try Levain Bakery about last year, and I tried their chocolate chip walnut cookie. It was pretty dang good. In order to reproduce the Levain Bakery chocolate chip walnut cookie, I used a recipe from Modern Honey. I don't think Levain Bakery has ever released their secret recipe, so you kind of just have to find some copycats. And like every cookie recipe, we're going to start by creaming together cold cubed butter, brown sugar, and sugar for about 4 minutes until creamy. At this point, we'll crack in an egg, mix it in, and then we're going to go for the dry ingredients. Don't do what I did, which was to kind of just throw in the dry ingredients on top. The recipe doesn't specify to whisk the dry ingredients together separately and then put it in. It just says to throw it in, but I don't know, I would recommend whisking them together separately just to make sure they're more evenly incorporated. Yeah, don't do this where you accidentally turn on the mixer before realizing it's not inside the bowl. So once your dough has come together, don't overmix it once again. Just go ahead and add in your chocolate chunks and your lightly toasted walnuts. Emphasis on lightly toasted walnuts. Do it, like you won't regret it. I think I went a little hard on the walnuts and the chocolate chips, so I had a bit of excess when I was making this, and also be sure to sneak a bite of the cookie dough, it's pretty good. Similar to the New York Times recipe, these cookies are pretty enormous, but you know, you're not going to regret it. They're almost like scones, but they taste fantastic. You'll see. You'll bake them off at a pretty high temperature of 410 degrees until they become lightly golden brown, and then you'll pop them out of the oven. In terms of taste, I love the toasted walnuts, and it just had the perfect amount of saltiness. In terms of texture, it was dense, it was chewy, it was great. In terms of aesthetic, it was pretty weak. It looked like a hot mess, not gonna lie. Okay, so now that we've gone over all 3 recipes for the chocolate chip cookies, I will be deciding a winner. And that winner is, drumroll please. That was a terrible, terrible drumroll. So without further ado, the winner of this cookie competition is Levain Bakery. Levain Bakery's cookies, I don't know why, they were just so dense and chewy inside, but also crisp on the outside. I think the lightly toasted walnuts also took the cookies to the next level. I will say that the cookies were even good the next day and the day after. I just kept eating them like they were irresistible. It was kind of crazy and not great for my health, but that's a different story. I would say the close runner-up would be Bon Appetit's brown butter and toffee cookies, just because brown butter is pretty rare in recipes and it really adds a lot of flavor to it. My least favorite would have to be the pan banging. I don't know what I did wrong, I just I don't know, I just did not like the cookies whatsoever. They were too cakey and they just did not hit the spot. So that's it for this week's video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching me make 3 different types of chocolate chip cookies. Now I have a bunch of cookies to feast on, which is not a problem at all, but I highly recommend you give the Levain Bakery cookies a shot. And I will see you guys next time. Until then, stay safe and healthy. Bye guys.